When he achieved fame and fortune, he said I was unworthy to be the matriarch of a military family and immediately broke off our engagement, marrying a princess instead. The princess, relying on her status, mocked me as lowly as an ant, bringing shame upon my family, and according to custom, I should have been sent to a convent and confined for life. Upon returning to the palace, I whispered to her, "He is just a man, how could he be worth our rivalry? What we should be fighting for is the world." Welcome to my channel. If you like this story, please click to subscribe. There are more wonderful stories waiting for you to listen to. Chapter 1. I have lived in this era for more than a decade and have seen many women suffer tragic fates after being abandoned by their fiancés. I never imagined that this would happen to me. Before joining the army, her.So told me that once he had achieved great success and risen to prominence, he would return to fulfill our marriage vows. Now, he has indeed achieved great success and risen to prominence. Upon his return, the people lined the streets for miles, cheering and celebrating. After paying his respects to the emperor, he hurried to see me, and the maids in the mansion were all teasing me with mocking smiles. When I arrived, he was standing under a pear tree, with pear blossoms gently falling on his shoulders. His silver-white armor made him look even more heroic. He was no longer the naive young man of years past, he now carried the aura of a warrior. Ji-Yun, I have been granted the title of General Yun-Hui, he said slowly. Congratulations. Before I could finish, he suddenly interrupted. I'm going to marry the princess. I suddenly noticed the coldness in his eyes, and all the tenderness from years ago was gone. The news came too suddenly, leaving me speechless for a moment. Finally, I asked, "Why?" His thin lips trembled slightly, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't. After a moment, his brows furrowed, and a hint of impatience flashed across his face. He said, "Do you really want me to spell it out? We are no longer on the same path. Can you not see your place? You are unworthy of the position of matriarch of the clan." I lowered my eyes and sneered. "Very well. You truly are General Yun-Hui. You've achieved fame and fortune, and now you've climbed to the highest branch." As I turned to leave, he spoke again. "If you have nowhere to go, my general's mansion is not without room for you. Once the princess enters the household, I can take you as a concubine." If I had looked down on him before, now I found him utterly repulsive. "I have agreed to the annulment. You may leave now." I agreed too readily, leaving him somewhat embarrassed. But I never expected that while he told me he was breaking off the engagement because he was marrying the princess, he told others that I was temperamental, defiant, and lacking in virtue, unfit to be a good wife and mother, which was why he was ending the engagement. My father made me kneel before the ancestral hall all night to reflect on my mistakes. That night, at the celebratory banquet, her.So requested the emperor's permission to marry Princess Jiahe. The imperial edict was issued, and the entire court congratulated him. The next day, when my father and I went to the Pei family to return the betrothal gifts and marriage contract, we found that Princess Jiahe was also there. She looked me up and down and said, "Are you Fang Jiyun?" She didn't seem willing to let me off so easily. She turned to my father and said with a smirk, "A woman whose marriage has been broken off will never be able to marry again. It's a disgrace to your family. Lord Fang, may I show you the way out?" My father was a low-ranking official and didn't dare to go against her, so he had no choice but to let her speak. She looked at me with relish and said, "According to custom, she should be sent to a convent to take a vow of celibacy and spend the rest of her life in confinement. That way, your family will be spared the shame. What do you think, Lord Fang?" My father was a stubborn old man who felt this matter had brought dishonor upon him. He feared being mocked by others in the future. And with her mocking words, He had no outlet for his anger. He could only direct his furious gaze at me, blaming me for bringing shame upon him. But I stepped forward, meeting her disdainful gaze from above, and spoke firmly. Today, he abandons me because of my lowly status. If he faces such a situation in the future, he will abandon you as well. What do you have to be proud of? Are you comparing yourself to me? I am of noble birth, while you are as lowly as an ant. What right do you have to compare yourself to me? She stood on the steps, looking down at me from above. You rely on your status to think you are superior and can bully me as you please. But what will you do when your status is no longer as high as others? Hearing my question, she replied confidently, You will never see that day. Pei Yinsuan clearly did not wish to continue the argument and quickly dismissed me. As I left, he said that this world was ultimately lenient toward men, and today's incident was merely a youthful indiscretion on his part. It could not be blamed on him and would not harm his future. He urged me to take care of myself. On the way back, my father remained sullen, viewing this as a family disgrace. As soon as we entered the mansion, he made me kneel before the ancestral hall to reflect on my actions and ask myself if I had failed in my duties. In the evening, he came to the ancestral hall, stood beside me, and said in a solemn voice, I have considered what Princess Jiahe said. For the sake of your sisters, you must go to an old monastery in the countryside. This was Thurl Jiahe had mentioned. It was the man who broke his promise. Yet the world heaped all the shame upon the woman. I had seen such rules before. Those women who were betrothed but rejected were either sent to the family temple to be confined and reflect on their sins, sent to ancient temples to take vows and practice asceticism, or given away as concubines. My cousin in the clan married a sickly man for a marriage of convenience, but he died before the wedding ceremony. The elders of his clan insisted that she had brought him bad luck and, according to the rules, she had to be buried with him. These are the so-called rules of the world. The rules of this world leave no room for me to live a decent life. The next day, he ordered someone to send me away, claiming it was for my own good. But in reality, it was surveillance. From then on, they would keep watch over me in the ancient monastery. On the way to the monastery, the old women looked down on me with disdain and said, A daughter from a good family shouldn't bring such shame upon herself. If she knew what was best, she should have taken her own life. She shouldn't become a burden and ruin the lives of her sisters. In your eyes, I should have ended my life with a piece of white silk like my cousin, right? My cousin did not die because of pressure from her family, but because of the indifference and gossip of her relatives after she returned home. Everyone said she was a bringer of death, that she had killed someone, and that she was unlucky. Those so-called relatives treated her like a plague, and in the end, she took her own life late one night in order to find peace. But her relatives did not mourn her. Instead, they felt relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. Now they want me to make the same choice as my cousin. But I refuse. On a narrow mountain path, my carriage collided with another. In that carriage sat the crown prince. Coincidentally, a heavy rain began to fall, and both groups sought shelter at the same house. As we discussed poetry and literature, we found ourselves sharing similar interests and became fast friends. Amidst the shocked stares of the maids, he took me back to the palace and declared his intention to make me his concubine. When the news spread, everyone was shocked, and the criticisms from the past were compounded with accusations of being a femme fatale. Even my father's expression changed. However, as expected, the marriage was opposed by the empress, who ordered her female attendants to leave the palace and scolded my father without mercy. Everyone watched as I, the crown prince's concubine, was unable to fulfill my role, and mocked me for not having the fortune to be a noblewoman. After all the twists and turns, it seemed my future was sealed. No more marriage. Only a life of solitude with a lamp and a Buddha. This time, my father's attitude was far more resolute than before. His gaze sharp and ruthless. The maidservants by my side sensed the danger, fearing I might meet the same fate as my cousin, dying silently in the dead of night. I patted her hand, soothing her emotions, and whispered, "Don't worry. I'm not my cousin. I don't care about the world's gossip or the slander and accusations of the common folk. They cannot harm me, and I will not abandon my life because of these unreasonable rules." As I was about to be sent to the ancient monastery, the crown prince flew into a rage, dragged me to kneel before the emperor, and pleaded for permission to marry me. This act shocked everyone present, including the emperor. He trembled as he pointed at me, murmuring, "Elon." Then, staring at the jade pendant at my waist, his expression changed drastically. Thus, while everyone was still in a daze, I transformed into the daughter of the original empress, Xiao Ilan, and was granted the title of Princess Zhao Yuan. The emperor said that I looked a lot like my mother, and that he owed her a debt, so he bestowed many treasures upon me. Everyone inside and outside the palace was moved by my strange encounter. Even my personal maid couldn't help but say, "Princess, you are so lucky to have met the crown prince and been recognized as his daughter." I put on my elegant attire and casually remarked, "Good fortune isn't always bestowed from heaven, some is the result of careful planning." When the crown prince saw me, his expression was complex, and he called out with mixed emotions, "My imperial sister." I bowed and whispered, "I was able to return safely and reunite with my father, all thanks to the crown prince." He smiled forcedly, clenching his teeth, and said, "I never expected such a surprise." I smiled in response, but he stood there hesitating for a long time before finally asking, "Was the carriage accident that day truly an accident?" I remained composed, smiling slowly, and said, "Of course." At this moment, whether it was an accident or not no longer mattered. 17 years ago, Prince Yu rebelled and instigated a palace coup. The emperor's original empress gave birth to a daughter in the chaos. The empress passed away, and the princess vanished in the turmoil. Little did anyone know that she would eventually end up in the Fong family. The crown prince's mother was the empress who succeeded her. When my father was still a prince, she was a concubine. Yet she became pregnant before the empress and gave birth to a son, who is now the crown prince, 3 years older than me. Even when the empress was alive, despite having given birth to a son and claiming the title of eldest son, she could only hold the rank of concubine. Only after the empress's death could she become the empress, and her son could become the crown prince. She must have harbored various grievances in her heart, but she still had to present herself as a virtuous empress before the emperor. And she found the strictest tutors for me. She made me walk with proper posture and graceful steps. She made me bow my head and smile humbly. She made me study women's virtues and memorize the rules for women. She said that was how a woman should be. These were the rules imposed on women in this era. My father also spoke to me about these rules. He said I was the legitimate princess. Though I had returned from the common people, I must not lose the dignity of the royal family. He said he felt guilty toward my mother and wanted to make amends. To avoid gossip, he claimed that Maiken's encounter with the crown prince was actually the crown prince following imperial orders to leave the palace and escort the princess back. As for the rumors of romance, they were all suppressed. My father specially arranged a palace banquet to celebrate my return. I wore elegant attire and walked slowly forward, stepping onto the high platform under the curious gazes of the crowd. He could not hide her shock, her face betraying panic, which she quickly concealed. Perhaps she never imagined that the princess my father had just retrieved was truly me, the daughter of a lowly 6th-rank official whom she had once mocked as worthless as an ant. I sat in the high seat, while Pei Yin Suan sat below me. Even without looking intentionally, I could sense the complex gaze he cast my way. Jia He clutched her cup tightly, spilling wine onto her clothes. He probably never imagined we would meet again under such circumstances. Jia set down her cup, stood up, and announced her intention to play the zither to entertain the guests. After the song ended, the Empress Dowager spoke up at the right moment, praising her exquisite playing and how it touched the heart. She then shifted the topic to the marriage. The wedding of Princess Jia and General Yunhui is approaching, isn't it? As soon as the Empress Dowager finished speaking, there was a moment of silence at the banquet, and those probing glances were directed toward me. I remained composed, looking calmly at everyone present. But the Empress Dowager clearly wasn't satisfied with this response and continued. I hear that Zhao Yuan also had a childhood friendship with General Yunhui before returning to the palace. Now that he has achieved great deeds and married such a beautiful woman, I'm sure she must be overjoyed for him. This single sentence caused everyone present to tense up. Among those present, who was blind or deaf? The matter of the broken engagement was no secret. But no one dared to mention it. By bringing up this marriage again, she was merely reminding everyone that I had been rejected and abandoned. Using this to humiliate me. I saw the slow curve of Jiahe's lips and the hint of defiance in the corners of her eyes and brows. I set down my wine cup, smiled, and said casually, "It's not just a childhood friendship. We've been engaged for years." But when General Yunhui returned victorious, he said I was unworthy to be the wife of a general and insisted on breaking off the engagement. Princess Jia called me as lowly as an ant, unworthy to be mentioned in the same breath as her. The two of them are a perfect match. Truly a cause for celebration. The sarcasm in my words was evident, and everyone could hear the underlying meaning. Whispers filled the air. Pei Yansuan's face alternated between red and white, and under everyone's gaze, he hurriedly lowered his head. Jia and Jia clearly didn't expect me to break with convention and speak so bluntly. They thought I would consider this a disgrace and be ashamed to talk about it. But I was determined to expose their hypocrisy and let the world see who was at fault. The smile on my father's face disappeared, replaced by a faint look of anger. When Pei Yansuan requested the imperial decree for the marriage, he did indeed agree, even if he was unaware of the details. Hearing such heartless words today was a blow to his dignity. The emperor's expression grew displeased, and his gaze toward the Empress Dowager carried a hint of disapproval. The Empress Dowager quickly changed the subject, bringing up other matters. After 3 rounds of wine, I used the excuse of changing clothes and quietly withdrew from the banquet. The wind on the steps blew away the oppressive atmosphere. But Pei Yansuan followed me, his eyes fixed on the jade at my waist, and then spoke abruptly, "Since you were a child, you never let anyone touch this jade. It was a token of your feelings. The so-called accidental encounter was all your plan. The crown prince was just a stepping stone for you to return to the palace. You already knew your true identity, didn't you? I knew all along. So what?" His eyes betrayed a stranger's gaze. And he continued, "Then why did you choose to return at this particular moment? What do you intend to do?" I have nothing to say. I turned to leave, but he suddenly grabbed my wrist and shouted, "Fang Jiyun, you were different from others even as a child. While others played and laughed, you always sat alone, watching indifferently. The expression on your face at that time was not that of a child. You knew your true identity yet hid it for so many years. The emperor knows he has found his daughter back. But does he know how deep your thoughts are? Are you threatening me?" I raised my eyes slightly and stared at him quietly. "Though I am older than you, I only now realize that I have never truly understood your thoughts." His deep voice echoed in my ears. The wind on the steps blew me awake, and I whispered, "Perhaps I have never truly understood you either. After all, I never imagined you to be someone who would climb the social ladder and betray those who trusted you." Those words caused him to slowly release his grip. A look of embarrassment flashed across his face. The matter of the broken engagement was my fault. He then pressed further. But what about you? Have you ever felt even a shred of reluctance or longing for me? I rubbed my wrist indifferently and said, I never linger over those who aren't worth it. The humiliation you're facing today is the consequence of your own actions. I won't feel the slightest bit of guilt. The hope in his eyes gradually faded. But at the corner, someone was walking out slowly, mocking. What a show! I turned to look, and Jiahe emerged from the corner, her brows slightly furrowed, her eyes filled with anger and mockery. Pei Yansuan's face flashed with embarrassment, as if he wanted to speak. I spoke indifferently from behind him, General Pei. You should leave. After dismissing Pei Yansuan, Jiahe turned her attention to me, her red lips parting slightly. If the princess still has feelings for Pei Yansuan, I will withdraw from this marriage and give it to you. The word give was truly thought-provoking. I noticed the hint of provocation in Jiahe's eyes and smiled lightly. Do you think I'm competing with you over a man? Her eyes were filled with hostility, as if Pei Yansuan's earlier conversation with me had angered her greatly. I smiled faintly and whispered, a mere man isn't worth us competing over. Her gaze shifted, and the hostility in her eyes gradually faded, replaced by a hint of curiosity. As the princess of the Linghuai prince's mansion, do you limit your gaze to just one man? If so, how can you justify your ruthless methods? If the Linghuai prince were to learn that the death of his eldest son, the madness of his second son, and the disability of his third son were all you're doing, what would he think? As my words fell, her expression changed abruptly, her eyes darkening with a hint of gravity. Are you joking? If the Prince of Linhuai were to find out, he would not think this is a joke. For the first time, a look of fear flashed across Jiahe's face, accompanied by a hint of cruelty. Are you thinking about how to get rid of me? I met her gaze with a faint smile. She had already shed her former arrogant and self-important demeanor. That reckless and shallow appearance was merely a facade. Now, her eyes held a hint of seriousness, and her dark pupils were impossible to fathom. This was the real her. I have no interest in the private affairs of the Linhuai prince's mansion, nor do I care whether you are ruthless or not. But if I wanted to expose you, why wait until today? I stroked my sleeve, speaking casually. Her furrowed brows betrayed her thoughts, and her expression grew solemn. You chose Pei Yansuan, it was nothing more than a means to an end. The certainty in my words made her glance at me, and when she raised her eyebrows again, there was a hint of seriousness and caution in her eyes. A means to an end? That's utter nonsense. She remained stubborn, refusing to admit it. Though the third son is disgraced, there has never been a precedent of a woman inheriting a title. Your role remains that of a political marriage. If you marry into a prominent family, you will have no connection to the Prince of Linhuai's mansion, and you will have no reason to interfere in its affairs. But if you choose Pei Yansuan, things are different. Though he has military merits, he is not from a prestigious family and has no roots in the court. His parents are deceased, and he is alone. If you choose him, he will be like a son-in-law dependent on the mansion, while you can remain in the mansion and manipulate the power of the Linhuai Wangfu. After a moment, she regained her composure and asked seriously, what about you? What does this arranged marriage mean to you? I shrugged indifferently. It's just a piece of paper. It can be established, and it can be abolished. Upon hearing this, the corners of her mouth gradually curled upward, and she said, I underestimated you. It's a pity that Pei Yansuan is still gloating, thinking that he is truly a prized catch worthy of causing you and me to compete. He can't see clearly or position himself properly. How laughable. As I left, I spoke slowly. What I seek is the same as yours. If you join me, the Linhuai prince's mansion will be yours to rule in the future. Her furrowed brows gradually relaxed, but her eyes still betrayed disbelief. My return had made the empress despise me, for it once again reminded the world that she was not the emperor's legitimate wife, and that the crown prince was not born as the emperor's legitimate son. The carefully constructed situation she had spent years cultivating was now being disrupted. She was desperate to get rid of me. Just then, envoys from the northern kingdom arrived, seeking an alliance with the Great Yu kingdom. The envoy spoke on behalf of the northern kingdom's ruler, requesting the hand of a princess in marriage. In front of the high officials and the envoy, the empress did not spare her praise, saying that I was of noble birth, graceful in appearance, and of noble character, and that I was of marriageable age, making me the most suitable candidate. My father looked at me but did not respond. But someone below the dais spoke up in unison, "A princess's marriage alliance will bring peace and prosperity to both nations. It is a blessing for the people and the realm." The other princes echoed this sentiment, highlighting the benefits, with the fourth prince being the most enthusiastic. The elderly ministers seemed accustomed to such scenes, merely following tradition, stating that marriage alliances were indeed a wise choice, and that I was indeed the most suitable candidate. But only women can be sent for marriage. What kind of rule is that? Everyone in the palace had already tacitly agreed that I would go, and they looked at me with pity. As night fell, my father summoned me. I had been back for half a year, but he had rarely called me in private. We hadn't seen each other for more than 10 years. And even though we were father and daughter, we were like strangers. When I arrived, he was still looking at some documents. "Zhao Yuan, everyone in the court says you are the best candidate for the marriage alliance. What are your thoughts?" I remained silent for a moment before asking calmly, "If I refuse the marriage alliance, what will you do, father?" He did not openly show anger, but my words had already exceeded his expectations. Perhaps no one had ever dared to say no to him before. And here I was, his daughter who had returned unexpectedly, daring to speak out. He closed the scroll, tossed it aside, and turned to look at me, speaking in a deep voice. "Exchanging a single woman for peace at the border is something no emperor would refuse." And that was his stance. But what of that woman's fate? Is she destined to be like a floating lotus in the rain, drifting aimlessly? My voice was gentle, but his gaze carried a sense of authority. The fate of a woman is insignificant compared to the empire. Do I need to tell you that? Those words were heavy indeed. I remained silent. And he spoke again. "Those who wish to achieve great things must be willing to make sacrifices." Yes. But sacrificing a sister or daughter to pave the way for his empire, that is the sacrifice he speaks of. His expression darkened slightly, and he continued, "There are 12 princesses in this dynasty who have been married off to foreign lands. Even my eldest sister, Princess Yuyang, who was the most beloved daughter of the previous emperor, was married off twice. This is their fate, and you will be no exception." "I understand what you mean, father." I remained composed and responded calmly. I sat in the pavilion of the imperial garden. The Princess Wang, who was passing by and was of the same age as me, couldn't help but comfort me, saying that all daughters in this world were powerless and urging me to be more at ease. Watching her departing figure, I shifted my gaze to the delicate flower on the branch and said softly, "Everyone keeps telling me about the rules of marriage alliances for women. But why must it be women? Why can't it be a man?" What a good question. Why can't it be a man? I heard a clear voice coming from afar. I looked up and saw a person standing not far away, dressed in luxurious clothes, with an air of dignity in his eyes and a commanding presence in his brows and eyes. I bowed and said respectfully, "Princess." She stood across from me, studying me for a long time, as if recalling old memories, and said in a deep voice, "The practice of princesses marrying into other clans has existed since ancient times. You are defying tradition. Aren't you afraid of the world's criticism?" After pondering for a moment, I replied, Throughout history, marriages for political reasons have been justified by great principles and adorned with glorious titles. But they bind one's entire life. However, this should not be the shackles of women alone. Her narrow eyes fixed on me, her gaze holding an indescribable meaning. She continued, "After so many years, the great you has finally produced a woman with a heart like mine. It's not easy." I did not respond. And she continued, "If one day you have the power to change all this, what would you do?" I raised my eyebrows slightly, smiling faintly. "Our great you is brimming with talent. The royal sons are numerous and handsome. Why should we fear marrying into a foreign land for the sake of the nation? If a princess can do it, why can't a prince?" The oppressive gaze in the princess's eyes finally changed at that moment. After the shock, she laughed freely and openly, then slowly said, "Very good." Though the emperor had not issued an edict, it seemed that both inside and outside the palace had already tacitly accepted that Princess Zhao Yuan, who had recently returned, would be sent to the northern kingdom for a political marriage. Just a few days ago, everyone envied me for transforming from the daughter of a low-ranking official into the emperor's legitimate daughter. But in such a short time, the tide had turned. They began to pity me for my tragic fate, lamenting that I had not even enjoyed a few days of princessly glory before being forced to marry a foreigner. Pei Yansuan intercepted my imperial carriage on the palace path and coldly asked me, "If you had known this would happen, would you regret scheming to return to the palace?" I did not look at him, but spoke through the gauze curtain. "Do you want to hear me say I regret it? Then you may be disappointed. If I had known this would happen, I would have returned anyway." He stood there, speechless. Is trading the confinement of the rest of your life for a few days of princess's honor really worth it? Did he think I was merely obsessed with the title of princess? I couldn't help but sigh lightly, but I was too lazy to respond further. Amid the eager anticipation of the crowd, the imperial edict for the marriage alliance did not arrive. The He family, stationed at the northern border, submitted an urgent report to the emperor, stating that the northern kingdom was secretly colluding with the Qin kingdom under the guise of discussing a marriage alliance with the Great Yu kingdom. The northern kingdom had gifted the Qin kingdom over 10,000 fine warhorses, while the Qin kingdom had provided the northern kingdom with blueprints for a new type of crossbow. The Great Viet and Qin kingdom had been at odds for years, with no diplomatic relations between them. Yet the northern kingdom's actions had clearly touched the emperor's sore spot. Princess Yu Yang personally entered the Chaoyang palace and had a lengthy discussion with the emperor. As she departed, a hint of guilt flickered in the emperor's eyes. Days later, the envoys departed the capital, and the marriage alliance was left unresolved. The stone hanging over our heads finally fell safely to the ground. The maidservant beside me also sighed in relief, combing my hair while saying, "Princess, it is truly a blessing that you have caught the eye of Princess Yu Yang. If it weren't for her intervention, you might have been forced into a marriage alliance." I looked at myself in the bronze mirror and smiled lightly. There's no such thing as undeserved favor. It's simply knowing one's enemy and oneself, ensuring victory in every battle. That day in the Imperial Garden, I had been waiting for her. Princess Yu Yang is the emperor's older sister. She was forced into a political marriage with the king of Wusun in her youth. After the king of Wusun died, she was brought back to Diyu. She later married the Khan of Rurin. But 3 years later, the Khan of Rurin died of illness, and she returned to Diyu once more. Both the Wusun king and the Rurin Khan died in the 3rd year of their marriages, both from illness, though doctors could find no cause. Such coincidences would not be taken lightly when it came to this imperial aunt. Over the years, she has acted boldly and recklessly, with an unpredictable temperament. Yet no one dares to offend her, as her words hold great weight with the emperor. This is already her more restrained self. In her youth, she was rebellious and unrestrained. But I know that the hatred buried deep within her heart has never faded. Not even the emperor has truly seen through her. I personally went to her residence to express my gratitude. Upon entering the mansion, I saw her reclining on a beauty bed, surrounded by numerous attendants who were pouring wine and playing music for her. Perhaps they should not be called attendants, they were more like concubines. Such a scene, if seen by those rigid court officials outside, would likely result in petitions piling up on their desks. I remained composed, walked calmly to her side, bowed, and said, "Thank you, Imperial Aunt, for your assistance." She raised her eyebrows slightly and spoke slowly. "The favor I have granted you is not something to be taken lightly." I stood straight and smiled lightly. "Your Imperial Highness, seeing my situation, have you not recalled your own past? Do you not harbor any resentment or hatred in your heart?" Her gaze suddenly grew sharp, sweeping over me. Before she scoffed and waved her hand, the others dispersed at once. How could I not hate? On that day, all the court officials knelt on the white marble steps, speaking of the greater good of the realm. But in the decades since, who remembers my sacrifice? And whose realm did my sacrifice secure? Her tone was filled with resentment and anger. I looked into her eyes and said solemnly, "I share the same hatred as the Empress Dowager. I hate that they can treat women as tools with a clear conscience. Hate that they use women as stepping stones. And hate that they set so many rules to bind women in this world." Her expression changed slightly. Then she spoke softly. "But they set all these rules precisely for the sake of women. What can you do?" I spoke solemnly. "In my quest for survival, I have scoured the history books. But all I found were the words 'abolish it,' written densely between the lines. Yes. Sooner or later, I will abolish it." A flash of surprise crossed her eyes. And she said slowly, "I will help you because I see myself in you. Do not let me down." After leaving her mansion, I walked in a secluded area when someone came galloping toward me on horseback, startling my carriage. The coachman had been thrown off, and the horse bolted forward. As the world spun, I jumped off the carriage and landed safely, only to find that the person holding the reins was Jiahe. Her eyes burned with intensity as she calmly looked at me and said in a deep voice, "It seems I was right after all, you're no ordinary person. Using someone's life to test them, that's bold. And it's definitely her style." The carriage was damaged beyond repair. But she suddenly reached out her hand, and in the next instant, I was riding alongside her. She urged the horse in another direction and eventually stopped at a secluded courtyard. The courtyard was already stocked with fine wine. We sat across from each other. My fingers tapped the table as I spoke slowly. "If I didn't know martial arts, I might have died today under your test." She raised her cup to me, then drank 3 cups in quick succession. "I'll drink 3 cups to apologize for my past offenses. Please forgive me." I drank a cup of wine. "I don't care about the past. What I value is the future. After watching you from the sidelines for so long, you finally decided to test me today. Have you made up your mind? A man of honor speaks plainly. I'm waiting to see how you handle this marriage alliance. If you can't protect yourself, everything else is just empty talk." She spoke with a calm demeanor, showing no hesitation in acknowledging her own detached observation. "What? Are you disappointed? After all, you didn't see me kneeling on the ground begging my father for mercy. You didn't see me starving myself and smashing cups. And you didn't see me fleeing in fear." She teased. "If that were the case, it would be too boring." Changing the subject, she continued, "Regarding the marriage alliance, I initially wondered why you didn't seek help from the Shao clan. After all, they are your maternal clan. Even though the late empress is gone, there is still blood ties and shared honor and disgrace. Why did you stop doubting later?" I asked with a light laugh. She sighed softly. "Because when I learned the outcome, I suddenly realized that the Xiao family had already been standing behind you. Not just the Xiao family, perhaps the He family as well. And the fact that Princess Yang was willing to speak up for you was completely unexpected. This game, you entered it much earlier than I imagined. Yes. She was right. The Xiao family and the He family had already been supporting me. That urgent report from the border was also sent at the right time, causing my father to grow dissatisfied with the Northern Kingdom. When I was 7, my uncle had already found me. Over a decade ago, I had already entered the game. She snorted derisively and continued. A wise person doesn't speak in riddles. I am no saint. I desire the title of Prince of Linhuai and its troops. Under the guise of ambition, there is no room for mercy. Over the years, I have dedicated myself to cultivating both literary and martial arts, striving to match the men of my clan and make the Linhuai prince's mansion even more prosperous than before. All I wanted was to prove myself. But in his eyes, there was only his son. He even considered using me as a pawn in a political marriage. Even now, he is still contemplating adopting a son from a collateral branch. I remained expressionless and whispered, I know how difficult it is for a woman to survive in this world. If you're willing to be a puppet, exploited for your value and manipulated for a lifetime, it would be simpler. But neither of us wants that. So, why not take a chance together? The victor takes all, and the loser pays the price. Her eyes blazed with determination. I raised my cup to her, and everything was understood without words. The real power in the Prince of Linhuai's mansion was already in her hands. But once she adopted a son or married into a prominent family, this situation would be immediately shattered. All her meticulous plans would be reduced to nothing. And she was ambitious. She wanted more than just what she had now. She wanted the title of Prince of Linhuai. I asked in a low voice, Your wedding is after the new year. Are you really planning to marry him? She shook her head with a smile. Marrying him is a last resort. Now that we are together, this marriage loses its original value. The marriage may have no value, but the wedding itself does. Before I could finish, she looked at me in confusion. My father said the marriage alliance has been cancelled, but he plans to arrange another marriage for me, marrying me off to Song Qinian, the Minister of Justice. Jiahe's lips curled into a mocking smile, and she spoke without hesitation. Indeed, they all see us as the best tools for political marriages to balance the court. As for power and titles, they have nothing to do with us. I will tell my father to set our wedding dates for the same day. Shock flashed across her eyes, and her lips parted slightly, but she dared not ask. In the moment their eyes met, she seemed to understand. On that day, the emperor will marry off his daughter, and the prince will take a wife. With 2 grand weddings taking place at the same time, the capital will be bustling with activity. I rubbed the cup in my hand and said meaningfully, the new and old factions in the court were locked in a fierce power struggle. With the situation growing increasingly tense, the emperor sought to support the commoner-born Song Qinian to oppose the aristocratic clans. But the commoners lacked a solid foundation. Currently, the commoner faction was led by Song Qinian, the Minister of Justice. Therefore, the emperor's meaning was clear: the princess was to marry him, not him to become the prince consort, using the princess's prestige to bolster the Song family's influence. There are only 3 months left, she murmured. I rose slowly, stood with my hands behind my back, and said in a deep voice, that is enough. As the sun set, I returned to the palace before the gates were locked, and the empress had just sent someone to deliver a hairpin adorned with pearls. Looking at the dazzling pearl at the top, I could tell she was delighted. I had asked him what would happen if I refused the marriage. But my father said that in the imperial family, there are no fathers or sons. Disobedient princesses must be dealt with accordingly. They cannot marry if they refuse. He said that the former Princess Yang had defied imperial edicts. refused an arranged marriage, and disobeyed the emperor's orders. As a result, dozens of her close attendants were executed, and she herself was confined to the inner palace. The man she loved had his entire family implicated, and in the end, he personally knelt down to beg her to marry and be sent to the border, even accompanying her all the way to the frontier, completely extinguishing her hopes. My father left a warning: if I follow in her footsteps, my fate will be the same. After speaking, he coughed several times. His health had deteriorated greatly. Perhaps he knew it himself, so he hurried his steps. As for his daughter, the sacrificial pawn, he did not care. The next day, the imperial edict was issued, making the marriage official. I pleaded with my father to postpone the wedding until the following year, on the same day as Jiahe's wedding. Though he did not understand, he agreed to grant this minor request. When the news spread, people began to speculate, with the most prevalent rumor being that I had not forgiven Pei-Yen-Suan for breaking off our engagement, which is why I had deliberately chosen the same day for my wedding. When the empress saw me again, she seemed much more relaxed, as if the thorn in her heart had finally been removed. She said that even if I had temporarily escaped the arranged marriage through sheer luck, I could never escape the responsibilities of being a princess of the royal family. My marriage had never been a matter of free choice. I was merely a pawn to be used as a tool to balance the political landscape. Upon reflection, when I was with the Fong family, I had to fulfill the marriage contract they had arranged, live for the sake of their family's reputation, and if I brought dishonor to the family, it seemed I deserved to die. Now that I had returned to the palace, I had to follow the imperial family's rules. Either marry into a foreign country or balance the court. If I defied them, it seemed I would also face certain death. This life of being unable to control my own destiny, of being at the mercy of others, I truly hated it. One day, I will take control of my own destiny. As the year came to a close, my father, the emperor, held a banquet in the palace. When Pei-Yen-Suan looked at me, his eyes were filled with complexity, but I ignored him and walked past him indifferently. The Ministry of Rites was in chaos, with 2 grand weddings to prepare, and every detail of the rituals and protocols had to be perfect. Those aristocratic families, relying on their past merits, had already made the emperor wary of them. Over the years, they had acted recklessly, formed factions, and openly interfered with my father's decisions. Therefore, my father appointed a young man from a humble background to counterbalance them in the court. Unfortunately, the humble background was ultimately too weak. Now, this wedding was being held with great pomp and splendor, all to give the Song family a sense of dignity. On the day of the wedding, the entire capital was adorned in red. I left the imperial city to marry into the Song family. Meanwhile, Jiahe's wedding will take place at the Linhui prince's mansion, both inside and outside the palace. The atmosphere is bustling with excitement. The emperor has specially ordered fireworks to be set off at the palace gates in the evening to celebrate with the people. The emperor will personally preside over the wedding ceremony to demonstrate his imperial grace, and I will perform the grand ceremony with Song Qinyan, paying homage to heaven and earth. Outside the bridal chamber, the guests were having a wonderful time, while inside, everyone had left. Song Qinyan lifted my veil, and a look of amazement flashed in his eyes. He then knelt down on the ground and said, "I'm sorry to inconvenience the princess. Get up. You've done very well these past years," I said as I helped him up. If it weren't for the princess saving me back then, I would have died that winter. How could I be here today? The princess has given me a new life. His eyes were sincere as he stared at me. Song Qinyan's father had been a distinguished official for his contributions to flood control, but he was framed for embezzlement and dereliction of duty. Overnight, Song Qinyan became the son of a traitor. During his exile, I saved him, and my uncle arranged a new identity for him, allowing him to pass the imperial examinations as the son of a humble family and eventually enter the imperial court. Tonight is destined to be a sleepless night. I walked slowly toward the window. The princess has spent years planning this scheme, and now it has finally come to an end. That night, the imperial city was ablaze with fireworks, dazzling and brilliant. In the latter half of the night, the city gates were breached, and a storm was brewing, threatening to bring down the city. While the court officials were drunk and asleep, they did not realize that the heavens had changed color. 2 grand weddings were held simultaneously, causing the imperial guards to spread out. Coupled with the fireworks and the crowds of people, the roads were blocked. The Prince of Linhui had already sent people to deliver fine wine to the eastern and western camps. Afterward, his troops took advantage of the situation to tie down the eastern and western camps, preventing them from advancing or retreating. Meanwhile, the troops outside the city had already followed the battle plan agreed upon with my uncle, breached the city gates, charged straight in, seized the Xingyang Avenue, and advanced directly toward the palace gates. The situation unfolded suddenly. The imperial city fell. The imperial guards escorted the emperor and empress out of the city, and everyone in the palace was left behind. The empresses and concubines could only cling to each other and weep. Even the empress herself could not believe that in such a moment of crisis, she too had been abandoned. I had already changed into a set of sturdy armor, mounted a fine steed, and was waiting outside the Dingyuan gate. Behind me, my men were all armed and ready. Song Qinian stood beside me, waiting for the enemy to fall into our trap. Just as my father was breathing a sigh of relief after escaping, I clapped my hands, and rows of torches suddenly lit up, making it as bright as day. Seeing the scene before him, he raised his hands tremulously, his eyes filled with disbelief, and then his face turned pale as he said, You are committing treason. 17 years ago, you Wang launched a palace coup, and you fled in the same panic as today. At that time, you cruelly abandoned the empress, who was about to give birth. She gave birth to me in the chaos, but she died there. Tonight, as you fled in panic, did you ever think of your concubines and children? As my words fell, he stumbled back a step and pointed at me. When did you find out? Did you return after all this time just to seek revenge on me? My mother died in the chaos of war, and I was left to fend for myself in the countryside because you abandoned us, treating us like a burden. You only cared about saving your own life. Did you think that time would erase everything? That you could hide the truth forever? While you relied on your uncle's troops to rescue the emperor, you abandoned my mother and me like discarded shoes. Afterward, you ruthlessly suppressed the Shao family. How could anyone not feel heartbroken? You are heartless and cruel, yet you dare to pretend to be deeply affectionate, reminiscing and mourning. It's truly sickening. As I finished speaking, he spat out a mouthful of blood and collapsed to the ground, looking utterly defeated. The first rays of dawn illuminated the imperial city, where the outcome was already decided. My uncle led his troops straight to the imperial city, and the crown prince fought back fiercely. But he was no match for them. At least he showed more courage than the emperor. The crown prince was gone, and the empress set fire to the Phoenix Hall. The 2 empresses met the same fate. All because they married the same heartless man. It was truly tragic. I had my sword drawn at his throat, but I did not kill him. I wanted him to witness the changes I would bring about. He was under house arrest in the Qinqiu Palace, with the doors wide open. I walked in slowly. His hair was disheveled, and he had lost the dignity of an emperor. But his blood-red eyes silently declared his unwillingness to accept his fate. Rebellious daughter, he shouted angrily at me. As I raised my hand, someone placed a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone before him. with the imperial seal placed beside him. I looked at him, my lips curving into a smile, and said casually, "Rebellious daughter? Father Emperor was mistaken. I will be the Empress Dowager you personally crowned." He sat on the steps, his pupils dilating, then stammered, "You dare to be so ambitious?" "Yes. Father must write the imperial decree with his own hand. I will become the rightful crown princess of Great Yu, and I will be the first female emperor of Great Yu." I narrowed my eyes and looked down at him sitting on the steps. "Never!" he refused harshly. But I laughed lightly. "The emperor abandoned my mother during the palace coup. I am fortunate to be alive. Upon my return, you forced me into an arranged marriage, pressured me to agree to the union, and treated me as a tool to balance the court. Every time, you used the might of an emperor to coerce me. Now, power is in my hands, and the emperor is a prisoner in a cage. If the roles were reversed, would the emperor understand the pain and helplessness I feel?" His hands clenched into fists, pounding the steps. He coldly retorted, "When the history books are written, you will be cursed for all eternity." I scoffed. "If my father has felt it, let him reflect on the words he spoke to me back then. The imperial family cannot tolerate a disobedient princess. She must marry whether she wants to or not. Yet now I am making my father bow his head." Tasting the bitterness of having no control over one's fate. "This edict. You must write it whether you want to or not. As for the annals of history and the eternal infamy, I care not." He glared at me with wide eyes, his knuckles turning red. He trembled as he picked up the brush, and I dictated the words, which he wrote down. The first edict declared me as the crown princess. He was ill and had retired to the Chinchou Palace to rest. And from then on, I would act as regent. The second edict stated that after his passing, the throne would be passed to me, and I would ascend to the imperial throne. After finishing, he personally sealed it with the imperial seal. I put away the two edicts, raised my eyebrows slightly, and said slowly, "Father, you are still the emperor. Stay here and spend the rest of your life." As he stared in shock, the doors of the Chinchou Palace slammed shut. In the Chonghua Palace, I sat on the high throne, looking at the anxious gazes of the court officials. An eunuch announced the imperial decree, and the hall fell silent. They knew what had happened, but dared not object, for they feared the heavily armed soldiers outside the hall and the rows of arrows. In the end, they all knelt down and declared their obedience to the emperor's decree, shouting "Long live the prince!" I ordered a retrial of the Song family case and sent the thick stack of case files to the Hall of Eternal Peace. I would clear the Song family's name while he was still alive, so that he could see with his own eyes that he had been wrong. After many days of absence, his hair had turned noticeably gray. After reading the case files, he coughed up another mouthful of blood. "Father, I will declare to the world that you wrongfully executed an innocent minister." His eyes were filled with anger and resentment, which was like a solid slap in the face, announcing his mistake to the world. Probably no emperor had ever suffered such humiliation, with someone overturning his ironclad case while he was still alive. Then, he smiled self-deprecatingly. "Do you want me to issue an edict of self-reproach?" I stroked my sleeves and said solemnly, "If His Majesty is willing, that would be best. Besides the injustice done to the Song family, His Majesty must not forget to write about how he abandoned his wife and children, fled the city, and how he used the Shao family to ascend the throne, only to discard them once they were no longer useful." A flash of sharpness flickered in his cloudy eyes, and he coldly asked, "What else do you know?" I poured the medicine brought by the court physician onto the ground, tossed the bowl aside, took a handkerchief from a maid, wiped my hands, and looked at him with utter contempt. "Your cruelty goes far beyond abandonment. When you learned my mother was pregnant, You instructed the midwife and imperial physician. You wanted to see a mother and child both dead. Unfortunately, the palace coup came too suddenly, disrupting all your plans. Yet the Shao clan saved the emperor during the coup, and you seized the opportunity to blame my mother's death on the rebellion, attempting to conceal your ruthless deeds. But 10 years ago, my uncle had already noticed something amiss. He requested to be transferred to another region merely to lower your guard and make you let down your guard. Those dark secrets were exposed without mercy. He laughed wildly, saying with a reckless abandon, "You failed to uproot the weed, indeed. The consequences are endless." He spent 10 years cultivating you to overthrow my throne. His intentions are deserving of death. It's been far more than 10 years. I've been in this world for 17 years. The imperial physician said you have an old injury, compounded by anger consuming your heart. You have little time left. The medicine can prolong your life by a month at most. But a month is enough. You will witness me rewrite the rules of the Great Yu dynasty. His breathing was rapid, and he coughed violently. When he looked at me, his eyes were filled with resentment and unwillingness. "What are you going to do?" I smiled slowly. "I have already written a letter to the Northern Kingdom. It is a pity that the marriage alliance did not work out last time. I am willing to restore diplomatic relations and send the fourth prince to marry into the Northern Kingdom to form an alliance between our two countries." You. He was so angry that he couldn't speak. When I was forced into the marriage alliance before, the fourth prince spoke most fervently in favor of it, listing all the benefits. Now this great responsibility has been entrusted to him. I am sure he will be willing to sacrifice for the greater good of the nation. In the future, I will have the court historians write his biography to immortalize his achievements. There had never been a royal marriage alliance before. And with every word I said, his expression grew uglier. "You're crazy." I shook my head soberly. "I'm not crazy. I'm just daring to do what no one else dares to do. All of your rotten old ministers saw me write the letter and seal it with the imperial seal, and not a single one dared to stop me. Nor did any of them mention the benefits of the marriage alliance to me again." He closed his eyes in agony, unwilling to look at me anymore. As I left, I smiled lightly. The wedding procession will depart on the 16th of next month. I will personally see the princess off from the city walls. He was too weak to argue with me anymore, only pounding his chest and breathing heavily. That night, palace attendants came to report that the emperor had passed away. As the funeral bells tolled, I felt a moment of disorientation. The imperial physician had said he had a month to live, but I never expected him to succumb to the stress so soon. When the eunuch presented the list of those to be buried with him, Wang Meiren was still on it. I remembered she was the same age as me. My fingertips grew cold. These were more tools of cruelty. Those concubines who had borne no children were all in the prime of their lives. I tore up the list, abolished the practice of sacrificing concubines, and ordered a simple funeral, allowing him to be buried alone in Madong. I ascended the throne as emperor and changed the era name to Qingping. Song Qinian thanked me for clearing the Song family's name, and he could now present himself as the son of the Song family. The Song family was no longer branded as corrupt officials, and their descendants would no longer bear the stigma. Yet he voluntarily brought up our marriage. After all, we had gone through the 3 letters and 6 rites, paid homage to heaven and earth, and the entire court believed I would make him my consort. There had to be some resolution. Song Qinian hesitated slightly and said, "If the emperor finds it difficult, perhaps we should annul the marriage." I looked into Song Qinian's eyes, filled with complexity, and whispered, "There is no need. Announce to the world that we are divorcing." He looked at me with a puzzled expression. When hearts are in harmony, they come together. When they are not, they part. I want the women of this era to know that they too have the right to choose. Whether it be breaking off an engagement or divorcing, it is their freedom. and it does not tarnish their reputation. If they dare not, I will take the first step for them." With those words, Song Qingyan's gaze fixed on me, unmoving for a long time. Only when he realized he was out of line did he hurriedly apologize. Jia He inherited the title of Prince of Linhuai, which was her rightful inheritance. She became the first woman in Great Yu to inherit a princely title. On the day she entered the palace to express her gratitude, I saw the joy on her face. She said she had won her bet and that traveling with me had made her life worthwhile. She bowed deeply, knelt down, and requested permission to go to her fiefdom, promising that as long as she lived, the people of Linhuai would live in peace and prosperity. I granted her request. The confines of the capital would only restrict her, governing a region might allow her to truly showcase her abilities. Before she left, she even personally wrote a divorce decree, banishing Pei-Yin-Suan from the palace, ruining his reputation in court, and reducing him to a laughingstock with no place to stand. When Pei-Yin-Suan came to see me, his eyes were filled with strangeness, and he dared not look me in the eye. He requested to be transferred to the remote southern border, where the land was sparsely populated and plagued by malaria. I granted his request. But as he departed, he couldn't help but mock himself, saying, "I never truly understood you or Jia He." I paused with my red brush in hand and spoke slowly. "The southern border is sparsely populated, there will be no gossip or rumors like those in the capital." A wry smile appeared on his lips as he said with difficulty, "This is probably the karma for my betrayal, my clinging to power, and my insistence on breaking off the engagement." His figure as he left had an inexplicable sense of desolation. Looking back now, he must have felt like his dreams had been shattered. Everyone thought I was competing with Jia He for him. But now that the dust has settled and the truth is clear, he is nothing. What Jia He and I have always pursued is the same: power, freedom, a destiny not controlled by others, and a life lived without restraint. Now that I have ascended to this position, I must break old customs, reform outdated regulations, and establish new systems. In the capital, I have established the Bureau of Brocade, the Academy of Embroidery, and the Dyeing Garden. Those skilled in weaving, embroidery, and dyeing may apply, and new positions for female officials will be created. I have also established a school for women, allowing them to enroll and study, to understand the teachings of the sages and the changes of the times. In the imperial examinations, there will be no distinction between men and women, those with ability will be appointed. Women will be encouraged to engage in commerce, with reduced taxes, so they may step out of their homes and see the world. When the new policies were announced, the court and the country were abuzz with controversy. The old ministers dared not speak out directly, but instead criticized and lamented behind the scenes, crying out that the country was doomed. Song Qi, who held the rank of Right Chancellor, has always stood firmly by my side. Standing at the base of the white marble steps, he bowed deeply. What the emperor has done is unprecedented in history. But what the emperor desires is what I desire. I will devote all my efforts to assist you. Do you believe the old ministers who say the country is doomed? I surveyed the surroundings, my gaze fixed on the horizon. I believe in your majesty. One day, Great Yu will surely become a prosperous and enlightened nation. His eyes burned with determination, and his words were filled with conviction. It will be so. For I have seen a different kind of prosperity with my own eyes. My voice faded away with the wind. On the day the marriage alliance party set off on their journey, I stood on the city wall with my aunt to see them off. She gazed into the distance with me, seemingly recalling her own turbulent life. The first time I was sent to the Wusun as a marriage alliance at the age of 15. I was rebellious and unwilling, filled with resentment but powerless to change my fate. The second time I was used as a pawn, my heart was filled with hatred. So much so that I wanted to overthrow everything with my own hands. I stood facing the wind, and as it blew past, it carried the scent of freedom. From now on, no woman of the great you will ever be sent off in marriage again. Hearing this, the empress smiled broadly, as if a lifelong obsession had finally been fulfilled. You dared to defy the world and do what I wanted to do but couldn't. Your courage and resolve surpass mine. Her eyes sparkled with admiration. I once thought of preserving my own safety, but when I saw the women around me struggling so hard, and as a woman myself, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The rules here are suffocating, making it impossible to breathe, making it impossible for me to live a good life, a free life. The world is tough, and I just want to abolish these rules for them. My voice was low. She said solemnly, "This path will not be easy. Someone has to do it. I cannot completely change this era, but I want to do what I can. I will awaken their consciousness. And one day, there will be countless people like me willing to make this effort. One day, these women will know that they do not have to depend on anyone. They can have independent thoughts, self-awareness, and the right to make their own decisions." My voice was slow, filled with a smile. The princess seemed startled by my words. For a long time, the shock in her eyes did not fade. But I continued, "A drop of water can wear away a stone, and a grain of sand can build a tower. One day, these outdated customs will no longer bind the women of the world. They will be free to marry, study, do business, and enter public service." I answered too bluntly, and he looked a bit embarrassed. Tu looked up at the stars and said, "Princess, have you ever considered that I might not be from this era?" This statement left her speechless, unable to comprehend. I am indeed not from this era, but I have lived here for 17 years. Feng Jiyun is me, and Zhao Yuan is also me. From the moment she was born, I had already arrived here. Yet within the body of an infant lies the soul of a mature modern person. I witnessed the chaos of the Yuan Palace coup with my own eyes and saw my mother's tragic death. When my uncle found me, I was already 7 years old. Jiahe and my father both believed that my uncle had told me the truth about the past, that he had spent 10 years training me and plotting to seize the throne. But that was not the case at all. Before I was 7, I behaved like any other child my age, staying in the Fong household as a docile daughter. But I was waiting for his arrival. If all these events were part of a chess game, then the game began long before anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just 10 years. Ignoring her shock, I continued. These oppressive rules for women were already abolished in the era I lived in. In that era, there were countless pioneers. In this era, I am willing to be a pioneer. After a moment, she murmured, "Have you considered failure? If you fail, challenging imperial authority will mean certain death." I have. If I fail, I will die and return to nothingness. Compared to failure and death, I fear that my thoughts will be corrupted and assimilated by the rules here. I gazed at the mountains and rivers, took a deep breath, and continued. Having come this far, I have not lived in vain. Years of planning have made Dayu a country with an enlightened people, inclusive and open-minded. As for the rest, let future generations decide. You have done well. You have broken old customs, reformed outdated rules, established new systems, and broken free from the shackles of the past. From now on, women in this world will have many different choices. Her voice was filled with satisfaction. We exchanged a smile, and then I said, "I hope they will see the vastness of the world in their lifetime and no longer be confined to the love and hatred of the inner courtyard." And